Welcome to the Photobooth podcast. My name is Catalina, and I am the owner of Modern Photobooth Company. And today I'm sitting with Aaron Arce Stark from Ash Law LLP. Did I get that wrong?
No, that's right. That's good.
Okay.
Yep.
And he is going to be talking with us about contracts for your photo booth business, and of course, all the changes that we need to look at because of COVID. So, Aaron, welcome, and thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's great. This is a good topic to talk about with everything going on. So I am happy to give any information that you need.
Perfect. And I'm so happy to have you on because you are one of the few lawyers that actually truly understands the photo booth business. And it's refreshing to not have to explain for a couple of hours what it is we do exactly, because we're not identical to a photographer or
Right.
videographer. We have our own needs. So there hasn't been anyone who's touched on this subject for us, unfortunately, but I'm happy that we will be the first ones. So I have a couple of questions for you if you're
Yeah,
ready.
yeah. Fire away. I'm ready to go.
All right. So obviously, we've seen a lot of stuff happening with COVID, things that nobody really knew how to handle. We're kind of past that point now. And a lot of parts of the US are opening up. And now we're having to deal with a whole set of new issues regarding contracts, employees, and all that kind of stuff. And we've all been, we all talked about the force majeure clause and how everyone needs to have it. And I think that's a very popular word now. But what
Yeah.
other contract changes should we be looking at?
So, one of the ones that you should have in your contract now is that you want to make sure that there is a dangerous conditions type clause in your agreement, because while people might still be trying to have weddings, or events where they're renting photo booths, they may be doing it against the safety and health guidelines of the state, and every state is going to be different, or in the country, whatever country you're in, they're going to have their own sets of guidelines that address what people can and can't do because of the pandemic. So if you find yourself in a situation where you have a client and they are insistent on still going forward with whatever event they had planned, and it's going against some of the guidelines and you don't feel comfortable, you do want a provision in your contract, and you should have that in there anyway, outside of a threat of a pandemic, that says basically that if this event violates any laws or goes against the safety and health guidelines of the location where the event is taking place, that you have the right to not participate, to terminate this agreement, and you can determine whether or not you'll refund any money or whatever. But you could say you have the right to keep all monies paid, or not show up, or terminate early, and then cover what services you've rendered. And be compensated for that. But that's something that's really important to have in there. And that's a question I've gotten a lot from photo booth owners, is that the people are saying, we have a wedding booked in July, and they're still planning on inviting 300 people, and it's going to go against that. So if they don't feel comfortable, then that's that would be something that a photo booth owner could lean on, and also try to negotiate with their client. Say, really, I don't feel comfortable doing that. I've stated this in my contract, so maybe let's try to work together. So either you cut down the number of people, or we reschedule to a later date, so that way we're all safe, going forward. So that's an important thing to have in there. And by the way, if you don't have that in there, don't get too worried about it. You always have the right to not put yourself in danger. So you can say that, and you can, but this gives you at least some language to lean on if you have that in your contract. So
Okay, that's interesting. That's actually a really good point that, just because it's not in your contract, you don't have to complete it if you're in a group of people coughing and sneezing all over you.
right. You never have to place yourself in a situation where going forward would be against the law or against a guideline. You don't have to put yourself in that type of situation, and so you can use that. But it is nice to have that language in there. So, and I can address the force majeure clause too if you want me to, if that's something that I know that comes up a lot. But
Yeah, it probably would be helpful, but also maybe what you can also discuss is, we've gone through the first wave, and there's a very good possibility that there might be a second wave and a second shutdown. What can we do, I guess, with the force majeure clause to have it make sure that it covers us in the future? Maybe not even for pandemics, but maybe for like anything really, because acts
right,
of God and all that kind of
right.
stuff.
So a force majeure clause is basically, just to kind of recap on what it really is, it's an event that is unavoidable and unpredictable, and usually something that's immediate. So a pandemic could fall into that situation. It's been our position a lot of the times that it doesn't, and necessarily only because that a lot of these events, depending on what the event is, I mean, like if this was a photo booth event, if it was a graduation or something where it's really couldn't be rescheduled. But for the most part, like a wedding, these are non-time sensitive events, and they could be rescheduled. And because something could be rescheduled without a lot of harm, that kind of takes it out of this force majeure event. But still, they're important to have in your contract. It should be addressed, if something like that happens where it impedes the performance of the contract, whether, you can't show up, or the client can't have their event. What happens in that situation? Some contracts don't have these clauses at all. Some of them are very, they say, okay, if something like that happens, then there's a full refund. But the situation we're in now, where there's just multiple cancellations, multiple rescheduling, people just can't afford to give everything back. And they really shouldn't when something can be rescheduled. So basically the way we've been drafting them is that, in the event of a force majeure event, a pandemic, a government restriction, something that basically just impedes the ability for you to go forward with the service, we're asking that the client reschedule. They use the rescheduling clause or whatever rescheduling policy the photo booth owner has. And then if they decide not to reschedule, if the client decides not to reschedule, or it's just not possible, then the cancellation provision kicks in, and the agreement is deemed canceled. And then whatever policies surround the cancellation, usually it's that the photo booth owner gets to keep the non-refundable retainer in that situation. So that way they're not giving everything back. And they really shouldn't, because they held up their end of the deal by blocking off that date for them, by turning away other business. This is a situation that was out of their hands. So them being able to keep that non-refundable retainer is reasonable in that situation. So it was deemed earned once it was paid to them, because they blocked it off and they turned away other business. So that's a reason to keep that non-refundable retainer. So anyway, that's something that you should have in your agreement for sure. And you should basically really spell out what you get to keep, what you are agreeing to keep in the event of something like that happens. Or so that's
Okay.
that we're going, and we're trying to just really press that. I'm telling my clients that go back to their clients and say, hey, really, let's reschedule. This is not, if we can reschedule, let's do it. That should be the best. Hopefully that's the best outcome for them. But yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I know for myself, we've only had one person who actually canceled. They rescheduled their wedding 3 times, and then by the end of it they were like, "I'm done."
So so when I was dealing with this back when, it was March, it was still early on, and I had a lot of photo booth owners, photographers coming to me, and nobody knew how long this was going to last. So they were doing rescheduling of events to June or July, thinking we would be past this by that point, and it's obviously not looking like
Yeah.
that's the case at all. So now, what the biggest issue now is the multiple reschedule you brought up. So what happens in that situation? So in that situation, really, you can't make your contract all about addressing this pandemic. So you should have extra policies in place outside of your contract. So that way you can say, okay, I know my contract says I'm not going to give back the retainer if you cancel and but for this instance, I'm going to allow a rescheduling. I'm not going to enforce my rescheduling fee. Have some sort of policy in place that you could tell your client, and try to work with them, obviously, to try to reschedule. But you have to do it within reason, because if there's going to be these multiple changes and rescheduling, then the photo booth owner is going to have to. They don't want to miss out. The biggest issue is you don't want to miss out on a full paying client if people reschedule well into 2022 or something like that, which is an issue I had yesterday.
Yep, I'm seeing that too.
Yeah. So think about, one of the things that we've developed is we've said that, okay, if it's out further than a year that the photo booth owner's client wants to reschedule, then Friday, Saturdays throughout May and September are off. Like, you can't pick those days. Those are prime days, or, you could kind of have policies like that in place.
Right.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's like you're working with your client, but you're still protecting your business too. So
Right.
planning on
No,
having me do.
understood. I've heard a lot of people who have done that, and, some people who are like, "We're not charging any rescheduling fee for 2021." I've only had one person inquire about 2022, and technically it's January, so it's, like, borderline for
I know,
me.
right, yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah. But,
And
if it were, like, 2 full years, I could definitely see something like that working.
right, and you could, and you could have a fee involved if we're that far out and things like that. But
Mhm.
so yeah, you just got it's weird. Everything changes. You have to kind of get creative on how to make this all work.
Now, going back to the retainer, because a lot of us have the wording that our retainer is non-refundable, and I know that differs from state to state. Deposit retainer, all that kind of
Right.
stuff. But in terms of the wording of a retainer, I've heard some people say that the retainer now outlines things like the fact that it doesn't just hold the date, but it's also paying for like the administrative work and just explaining more as to why it's not a
Right.
refundable amount. Is that
Mhm.
something you suggest?
So yeah, that's really good language to have in there. So your retainer. So what I'm doing now, because especially because of this, I'm advising my clients that we should all be using booking fee or some sort with the language fee in there somewhere, retainer fee, booking fee, because it connotes this idea that once you're paying for that in order to book these services, like that's what it's being used for, even though it's going to ultimately be applied to the overall package price. That this is the initial payment that you're using to cover administrative costs, to book services, so that the photo booth owner turns away other business, and that's what you're explaining that in your contract too. It could just be a couple of sentences. This is a non-refundable booking fee because I'm using this to, it's legal consideration to reserve my services, and it covers my administrative costs going forward and all that kind of stuff. You could say that in there, and I would totally advise to do that, because you want to explain to your clients why, and also it's an easier pill to swallow if they do end up canceling, and you say, well, it's non-refundable, and they can understand because it's right there in black and white why it was non-refundable.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, that's a really important thing to do. So I do like using booking fee. It's just kind of this like, oh, this is the fee I have to pay just to book you, and I like that. I like that. What's implied in that. So that's a good verbiage to use. I mean, retainer deposits. I hear all sorts of stuff about it. It's like, I wouldn't get too hung up which word you should use, just as long as you are explaining, like you said, Catalina, that what it's being used for.
Mhm.
Um, One quick side note, now that I'm helping photographers and photo booth owners navigate this situation where there's a lot of cancellations, where I'm seeing threats of litigation by their clients is when the retainer or booking fee or whatever you wanted to call it was 50% or more. So so now I'm really, and this is something I've done for a while. I say really people should probably break it into thirds. When people pay, the first payment should be a third, because that just seems a little. It's a good amount to cover administrative costs to for the photo booth owner. As an initial payment, it's enough for them.
Mhm.
Um, but it's not so big where their clients are going to just be like, oh my God, I got to cancel and I lost all of this money and you didn't provide any sort of service. So once it gets that 50% mark is when the only time I see people threatening to sue, or they go out and they hire a lawyer because they're like, oh, I can hire a lawyer and yeah, it's going to cost me money, but if I get that 50% back because I hired a lawyer, I still make out better. Whereas if it's a third, you might just kind of break even.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I mean, what I find interesting about that concept, and this is something that I've considered quite a bit, not even just thirds, but doing like installments, because as a photo booth owner, like we have to do all the creative and all the coordination beforehand, in order to deliver, right?
Right.
Unlike a photographer who is like there is definitely some administrative work before the wedding, but the majority of it is done after the wedding, right? And that's something that I think a lot of people have struggled with photo booths, because we say like I had one cancel the weekend before their wedding. Their booth was ready to go out, right?
Right.
And she asked for a refund. I actually gave her a full refund with the exception of the retainer, which for us is $500. I was
Hmm.
comfortable keeping that amount because of the amount of work we had done on her photo booth job already. Um, And so, yeah, that's really made me think about how to structure pricing going forward to make sure that we do have this covered, not just in pandemics, but like in any type of cancellation.
Well, right.
So,
It's any type of, and because people are gonna get upset no matter what they're canceling for. Now they have a better reason maybe that they feel that they can cancel, but still, if people generally these are for joyous events, right? So if they're canceling, there's probably some issue they're dealing with, and so I think so when their vendors and the photographers and the photo booth person and this and that, and everybody says, "Hey, we're keeping all this money," I think it maybe can boil over. So it's a tough situation. So yeah, so if the more reasonable you can make your payment installments, the more you can lay out in your contract what uh, the retainer is being used for, the better you're going to be to defend yourself against not having to give back the retainer later on if they cancel. So yeah.
of course. Yeah.
Yep.
Awesome. Okay, so I have a bit of a hard one for you, I guess. Photo
Okay.
booths are high touch, right? A lot of us are
Yeah.
trying to convert to touchless or having the attendant do most of the touching of the booth, but I don't think we can do it forever. So, is there such a thing as, release of liability for cross contamination or virus, like anything to protect us from people touching the booth and getting sick if someone else touched it?
Yeah. So this is a very good question, and I mean I can see this being an issue, and it may be an issue later. In terms there may be some sort of litigation where someone says I was at a wedding and the photo booth got me sick because I touched it. So you can have a general limit of liability in your clause that if anyone gets hurt, and your agreements should have something like this anyway. That if the photo booth falls over or something like that and it hurts someone, that you're going to limit any sort of liability. You won't be, um, uh, you know, you won't be liable for that
Mhm.
unless. But where you do become liable and what you can't contract around, especially in this situation, is if you're negligent. So, like if you put the photo booth down and you didn't secure it properly, you put it on a hill or something like that, and you should have known, being the professional, that this could fall over and hurt someone, so you could be liable for that.
Mhm.
But if the issue with getting sick and touching, it might be a good advertising thing to say, hey, we put hand sanitizer next to it, and when Clorox wipes wipe down the screen or something like that, so we're always like clean. But no, you really don't. And in my opinion on this, you can't really be held liable in that situation because there's this assumption of risk that everybody has when they know they're touching this. It's on their responsibility to wash their hands afterward, not touch their face and those sorts of things. It would
Mhm.
be because if it's kind of a slippery slope if you start accusing and suing people and companies because they have things that require touch, and people can say they get sick, right? So you could start suing everybody. You walk into a bank and they didn't clean the door handle on when you walk, it could go
Right.
crazy or whatever, right? In a grocery store, touching merchandise in a grocery store that other people have touched, are they supposed to wipe that down? So things like that. So it is sort of on them, but I could see, that happening. Where this gets more serious, so is that if you yourself were sick as a photo booth operator person, they're operating the photo booth or helping out, and you knew you were sick, um, and and then you still attended this event and still help people work the photo booth and things like that, then you could be considered as being someone who's negligent. You had a duty to not be there and spread this virus around. But that's only if you knew that you're sick,
Okay.
um, and knew that you may be sick with this potentially lethal disease. It's like if it's a common cold, or that's where I could see maybe something like that happening.
Okay.
um, and there's already kind of some cases coming out about that. um, Not with photo booths, but just where people attend certain places knowing that they're sick.
Yeah.
And so that could be an issue. But no, in terms of just use of the photo booth, and people know that this is how you could potentially get sick, then it's really on them, that they have the responsibility to make sure they're going to be clean. But you guys could always say, hey, we understand this is a high touch thing, so we're doing our part to make sure that it's clean. But
Mhm.
yeah.
So a lot of our photo booths have like a disclaimer screen which we use for, sharing of the photo and that.
Right.
is it like overkill to add it on there, or doesn't really matter? Like that serves no purpose to say like you're accepting the risk by touching this, or
You
should
know,
we
it's
stay
kind of
away?
crazy. I mean, I'm starting now, like we're talking about it. I'm thinking, so, okay, I mean, this is actually kind of like a lot to think about, actually, because for one, we'd have to know if you knew that people were getting sick. Like,
Mhm.
so it's kind of about your knowledge, right? If you knew that people were getting sick by using your photo booth, then yeah, maybe you might have a duty to disclose, like, hey, that you're touching this. You gotta, either you have to provide something to make sure they're not doing that, or you would have to say that there's some sort of assumption of risk by doing this.
Mhm.
I think that might be overkill, but it really is if you can kind of pinpoint the fact that, that people are touching it. It's just not. It's also not a situation where it's not like food or something like that where where there's a higher risk of y- you know getting sick that way. This is something different in a sense that you don't necessarily need to warn people about all that. But I could see if there was some sort of if there's just some situation where, yeah, everybody's getting sick by doing these photo booths, we gotta warn people. But that's not the case. So,
I feel like we could also be like, well, here's a picture of you with 3 people and you're not 6 feet apart.
well, that's
You
the
know?
thing too. Like, and but that's not your responsibility, right? To make sure
Yeah.
people are
Well, that's what I
observing
mean. Yeah.
right. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
It's like, how do
Um,
you prove that it's the photo booth, or you just standing
well, that's
really
also
close
the thing.
to all
Yeah,
the
good
people?
point. That's also what I was gonna say. You have to show negligence. You have to show causation. So how do you know really where anything like that came from? But
Mhm.
people are just for, like I said, for sort of marketing purposes, letting people know, hey, wipe this down and hey, do this or whatever. Like if you get COVID testing, they're basically in situations where people are sick and they are touching it. Like if you had a photo booth event at a COVID place or something, then yeah, maybe you might have some responsibility to be like, hey, we have to wipe this down each time or something like that, right? But just some
Yeah.
general event where you just you don't have that type of knowledge that someone is going to be spreading this really, or that your photo booth contributes to the spread of this, then yeah, there's really not a duty to do that. It's kind of so it really comes to just knowledge and whether or not you can kind of contribute that to the spread of it. But I wouldn't worry. I think that's like way far out and left field. I don't think that's
Yeah.
responsibility that I would worry about. But I can definitely see people, have being somewhat concerned. But I wouldn't be if they were coming to me and asking me, I'd say no, you shouldn't be concerned about that. Yeah.
So it's funny you should mention, like, having a photo booth in a COVID area. We actually had a hospital reach out to us saying they wanted to have a photo booth there for nurses to, like, and doctors to give, testimonials of what was going on with COVID, and these are, like, COVID nurses and doctors, and I'm like, you realize that it's a high touch area?
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
mean, yeah, it's a
I know
high.
you guys have a lot of, like, alcohol on hand, but
Yeah, I
we
mean,
didn't do it.
even do something as simple as just putting like, make sure to wash your hands after touching
Yeah.
this. Other people have touched it before you, and it's not being wiped down. So you may
Or
you
yeah.
put something like that. That would be, but that's kind of a situation where like maybe putting something. But then again, it's common knowledge too that um usually where negligence comes in is when there's this unforeseen danger that maybe and somebody else doesn't know, and because you know it and you didn't warn someone about it, then that's where you might have some liability. But everybody knows that this is how it spreads. I mean, you see every 2 seconds you got to wash your hands, got to do all this stuff. So because of that, the duty really to warn people or to do something about it really isn't there because people already know.
Mhm.
Um, so
Right.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, crazy
So
times, huh? What a weird thing to talk about. So.
seriously. So this kind of leads me a little bit to employees that we might have. And, we've all heard about employees not wanting to come back to work and stuff. And for us, like we're trying to do a lot more digital drop-offs and hands-free photo booths and whatnot. But at the same time, I still want to employ my staff. And I think there's a huge benefit to having a person there. And our staff were always a big part of what made us such a great company. So, is there any precautions, or anything that we should be looking at in terms of our contracts with our employees? And what about people who are like, we don't want your staff wearing protective gear, but obviously I feel like we have to let them wear it if they feel
Right.
comfortable.
Yeah. So in terms of protective gear, I mean, you should people. you have to protect yourself too, and you want to be able to provide the service so that you're safe as well. And especially with your employees, if you're sending people out there, then yeah, you might actually have a duty to provide them with, if they're going to in a place right now where, people are having events right now, yeah, there's a threat of getting COVID. So um so you know if if they're going into these events, you guys might, as a business owner, might have to help and provide some sort of mask or protective equipment for your own employees before they go out there.
Mhm.
If you're sending them into an environment that could be some known danger. So, but in terms of your clients, and they say we don't want you guys wearing this. Well, this is your business. This is, you call the shots on how you operate your own business, and you tell
Mhm.
them that's the way we operate. So if you don't want us, that's how we're going to go. So that's also where that dangerous conditions clause comes in too. That you're going to do what you feel safe doing, and they have to be okay with that. And if they're not okay with that, then you can terminate this agreement, and then that's it. So that's why that's important too to have in there. But yeah, definitely. I mean, you should be wearing masks. You should be doing those things to protect yourself, and also protect the people that are at the event too. So
Yeah, of
yeah.
course. Well, that's really like the most pressing questions I had. But, in your experience, is there anything else that you feel is important for photo booth owners to know or consider with, their contracts, or even how they're dealing with, these refunds and people canceling and all that kind of stuff?
So the refund issue is really tricky. This It's funny because I have I've gotten a lot of clients dealing with this stuff, and then I've kind of, a lot of it I've taken over communication with clients, with my photography and photo booth clients, and basically taking over communication that they have with their clients and navigating this refund issue. And there's this legal side to it, but then there's also just this business side to it too. Kelly, you mentioned that you refunded somebody when they canceled on you, that you just, even though you could have kept that, you did keep the retainer, but you refunded everything else, and you could have kept
Yeah.
that. It kind of is like, well, what's the smart business thing to do?
Mhm.
And then what's the legal side to do? So a lot of times, yeah, these uh, photo booth business owners can keep a lot of what they've been paid based off of how their contracts are written.
Yeah.
But is it the smart thing to do? And I know it's really hard because people are getting massive cancellations.
Mhm.
So what I've been just telling clients, and that, but just to try to meet somewhere in the middle. Maybe you don't refund everything, but you try to refund a portion, or you provide them with some other extra service or something like that, or be creative in terms of how to settle this disagreement over the cancellation.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's a lot of finesse and trying to find the happy medium. And a lot of people are leaning, a lot of their clients are leaning on the fact that, oh, this is a force majeure, this is a frustration of purpose, that it's impossible to have these events. But the issue really is that it's not always the case, like we had mentioned, because one, you can reschedule it for the most part, unless it is a
Mhm.
time sensitive event. But also, it's not necessarily impossible, because a lot of these events people are trying to cancel aren't happening for another couple of months. Um, we probably will be in this situation, maybe, but maybe not. And so that's why it's really hard to allow, when people say I need to cancel because of this pandemic, but my wedding isn't until September. Um, it's totally understandable that they would want to do that and reschedule or cancel, but the thing is you can't necessarily lean on calling this a force majeure event, because we all know it's here and we can all make arrangements to address it. It's not something that just happened completely unexpectedly. Now we know what we're dealing with.
Yeah.
So to say something's impossible is not necessarily true. You can just reschedule it. But that's the number one thing, is to try to really convince your clients to try to reschedule. And then if not, then work out something where you can give a partial refund. But keep in mind, if you do get that one client that is just a pain and they're just hell bent on getting their money back, you may just want to give it back. I know it can just be really hard to do, and even as a principal point of view, like, no, this is mine type of thing. But it sucks to be sued. You don't want to be sued, even though you might have a winning case. It still is not a good thing to do. It's horrible. It really is a stressful thing, and it's going to cost you money anyway. So it's better to be that person where that client says, "Oh, I went to them and they gave it back and they were so nice about it and they really helped me out." And then they go and they tell all their friends that, "Hey, if you ever get married, work with these photo booth people because they were great with me." So, that could be worth a lot in the long run. Something to think about. So,
Yeah, no, I mean,
yeah.
that's kind of been my thinking with it the whole time. I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of these people, right? Especially with this girl who like rescheduled her wedding 3 times and then just got so frustrated. She's like, "I'm done. I don't know if I'm gonna do it
Right.
right."
Yeah, these rescheduling multiple times is an issue too. And so, yeah, there's just no, it just sucks. There's no easy answer for this, really.
Mhm.
We all have to be kind of flexible in that. But it's true. You run a business, you count on this money, you've budgeted for this money. A lot of people have independent contractors or employees that they're paying, and so that's what that money was going toward, to keeping your business afloat. So
Yeah.
I can understand completely why people are not jumping to just refund everybody. So yeah, so it is a tough sell. That's why being proactive too is really good. So it's really important to know if people haven't canceled with you yet or rescheduled, to send out your policy on what people can do. Hey, we know this may affect your wedding. Um, we are wide open for this month and that month. If you want to reschedule, please do that right now. We'll get you guys set up. No fee changes, no nothing. Do that. And then maybe try to encourage and be out front with it. So that way you can maybe avoid people just feeling like they're helpless and they just come and they cancel with you. But if you're more proactive, and then that way you can avoid a lot of problems too. You can remind them that it's good to reschedule because the retainer is not refundable. Keep that in mind, and kind of
You're
let
so
people know
right.
that. So
Yeah,
yeah.
and actually that does trigger another question, for me. People who do reschedule, what we've been doing is we've had them actually sign a cancellation agreement for the original date, stating that the retainer will be moved to the new date, and then having them sign a brand new contract, which of course does have new clauses in it, and we do let
Right.
them know that. But, is it better to do it that way, or is an amendment just as good to the original contract?
So what you're doing is fine too. Just having a cancellation agreement, it's always good to do that period, to have some sort of agreement like, hey, we're canceling this and we're relieved from any obligation on that date. It's being wiped from the calendar. So that way it's all um, upfront and clear. So it is important to do that. So that's good. So in terms of moving it to a new contract, you could do that too, because especially now, a lot of people are updating their contracts to address these certain
Yeah.
situations. But, you know, technically it is an amendment if they're just changing the date and if
Mhm.
both parties agree. So you might get a client that doesn't feel, that wants the terms of the old contract because that's what they originally signed with you about. And if both people are just agreeing just to change the date, then it could carry over. So yeah, you have to let your client know that, like you do. Hey,
Mhm.
we're updating this contract, and we can keep the same one, or we can go forward with this new one. But yeah, when they originally signed that with you, and if both parties are agreeing to amend, and I'm sure there's some sort of amendment provision in your contracts, then yeah, the old clauses would stay, and it would kind of still carry over. So that's how we're doing it in terms of advising our clients, is that you would just have an amendment, and
Mhm.
then any new clients would sign the contracts that we've been revising for them. Just because I do get a little nervous about switching terms on people and kind of starting over, unless everybody's absolutely clear about that. But
Mhm.
yeah.
Awesome.
Mhm.
Okay, and for anyone who is interested in having their contract reviewed, you have a really great deal going on. And I know we've worked together on contracts before, and I use a lot of your contracts in my business now, even though I am in Canada. But
Yeah, yeah.
you understand the business, which is again the biggest part of this for photo booth owners. So you have a special right now for people to have their contract reviewed for, I mean, everything really COVID related, and it also includes a 1 hour consultation for 4.99. Is that right?
Yeah, 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 for 49, yeah. So we take the photo booth's owner, their agreement. We look at it because I want to know exactly how they operate. Everybody kind of does things a little bit differently, and I want to make sure that we maintain their overall specific needs that they have in their contract. Then we revise everything. We look for if there's any holes that are there. We make sure we beef up other provisions. We go further into addressing this rescheduling and cancellation, which will be very helpful in the time that we're dealing with, but just in general. So we make sure that is spelled out very well in their contract. And then it takes about a week or so. We get it, we address it, or we revise it, set up a call with the photo booth owner, and we go over it every single sentence by sentence. It takes about an hour because I want to make sure that they completely understand everything in their agreement, where it is, how to find it, and how to explain what those things are in case their clients have questions too. Then we finalize the changes, and then they're good to go. And we also give them, we developed our own COVID policy and procedure on how to address multiple rescheduling, and if things are pushed out for a year and what happens. And so we kind of, because over the last few months we've dealt with a lot of different issues, and so we've been trying to work on a document that helps address each of those issues that that photographers or photo booth owners can use, and just send out to their clients now, and say, hey, this comes up, this is our policy dealing with that. So because I know a lot of people are struggling trying to figure out, I don't know what to do. People are wanting to push this out for a year and a half, and I don't even know if I'm still going to be if I'm still going to be doing this, or where I'm going to be, and da da da. So our COVID policy about that addresses those types of situations. So yeah, so that's all included. It's all good.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, it's been really great. We love doing it because it's just so informational too for the photo booth owner because a lot of people don't really know, or they might be too embarrassed to ask, like, what does this mean, that in their contract. So I get that, and so I explain it to them to make sure they get it, so that way it protects them too, and it's important for them to know that information. So that's why that consult is really, really good. People really seem to enjoy that part of it. So, and then we just, any questions they have too, we kind of like what we're doing now.
Yeah.
I'll address. So yeah, that's how it goes. Yeah.
And the best way to get a hold of you is your website then?
Yeah, my website, there's a contact page on there, where people can email me, aaron@ashlawllp.com. And yeah, I'm available and happy to talk and help whoever needs it. So we're there.
Amazing.
We're there if you need us.
Sorry?
I said we're there if you need us. So
Yeah, no, I mean, you guys, I like I said, I've dealt with you guys in the past, and it's always been great. So yeah, so thanks so much again for taking the time to talk with us about this. I know the photo booth owners are going to be, pretty ecstatic about getting to talk to a lawyer about photo booth stuff, because I don't think
yeah. No, I'm happy. I'm really glad you're doing this. It's very helpful for them. So yeah, thanks so much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, well, it was great. And thanks again. And so anyone else who's listening, like I said, ashlawllp.com. If you want to get a hold of Aaron to have him review your contract, you can get a hold of him directly from there. And other than that, we will see you guys next week. Thanks so much, Aaron.
Thank you.